Hello and welcome to this edition of Akron Buzz. I'm your host, Aaron Coleman. We have a very special guest here in the Akron Buzz studios today, and that is none other than award-winning author and sports columnist from the Cleveland.com, Terry Pluto. Terry, welcome.
Hello, Aaron.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. We certainly appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're just going to jump right into it here. John Beilein has been reassigned within the Cavaliers organization. They haven't had the start that they were accustomed to having. J.B. Bickerstaff has now come in as an interim coach, and the Cavaliers have won 2 of 3 as of right now. What has been the key in that transition from Beilein to Bickerstaff, and what has been the common denominator in those 2 wins?
Well, a couple things. Number one will be, we'll see how this is sustained, but the NBA I believe, is the hardest league to coach in, at least of the 3 major sports, because the average coach lasts slightly more than 2 years with his team. You start with that. And secondly, the NBA, they look at NBA players, they don't want to hear about coaches from Europe like David Blatt. They don't want to hear about college coaches. They want to hear, what did you know about the pro game? And I think one of the difficult things that Beilein had was, 42 years in college, all the way from actually a high school JV coach to Michigan, all these accolades and so on. But if you look even at his best teams at Michigan, he never had like the top 10 players or whatnot. Right. Most of his recruits were like that second 100. He was not used to the elite athlete and the big ego. And the NBA guys were not used to a coach coming in here saying, he had these special balls to teach rotation, and this is how we pivot, this is how we pass. I mean, it looked like the start of Hoosiers or something in the movie, and they didn't want any part of that either. So, whereas now had John won a title in the NBA or whatever, you can coach however you want. So it started rocky, and it kind of stayed that way. And finally, I'll just say this, I'm 64. John was 66 when he took the job. I just think at that age, the energy level that's required to make such a change, that was asking a lot of himself. And I think he got overwhelmed. He just really did. Yeah,
and when you're a coach in the NBA level, it's really 24/7, 365. And for a older gentleman like John Beilein to kind of put himself in that role in such a late time in his career, it was asking a lot.
Because he changed. Now, had he been an NBA creature, for example, like Greg Popovich is in his 60s, he's used to it. So you know where you can, you always say you work smarter, not harder. You know where your systems can go on that. Where he, in theory, it made sense. This guy's used to coaching younger guys. He's considered a great teacher of basketball. We have younger guys who need to be taught. That's what the Kobe Altman thought. But in practicality, you also come in with Tristan Thompson, Kevin Love, and some others, and they just were not real interested in what John Beilein had to say. And John Beilein, frankly, was not interested, at least, or not able, at the very least, to communicate with these top players where you really can't make them do anything. You try to influence them. I mean, they're making more money than you are.
Yeah.
They have much more standing in the league than you are. They know that there's a guy over there wearing a suit one day in that head coach's chair, and a couple months later there'll probably be another guy. You've seen them all come and go. I mean, think about Kevin Love. He came here in 2016, and he went through David Blatt and Tyronn Lue and Larry Drew and John Beilein, and now he's on J.B. Bickerstaff. And if you roll it all the way back to 2011 for Tristan Thompson, you add the names to that list of Mike Brown and Byron Scott. So what's I meant about there's a guy here in a suit, there's going to be another guy in a suit.
Yeah.
So, I don't have to really all that much worry about impressing him. Now, if he could help me be better and I can make more money or whatever, then I'm interested in that. But it's, like I said, it's a rough gig in that league.
Yeah, it certainly is. Terry, let's segue over to the Indians right now. They're in spring training over in Goodyear, Arizona. They're kind of behind the 8 ball as it stands right now.
I wanted to make one other point because to finish that. Now, why is John Beilein? John Beilein gone and J.B. Bickerstaff. J.B. Bickerstaff, while I believe he's like 40, has been in the NBA most his whole life because his father, Bernie Bickerstaff, was a coach. I was talking to one guy. I remember when I was playing for his dad, and there's little JB at 12 years old shooting around with us after. In other words, he's an NBA creature. They're used to him. Want the fact he had been an interim coach a couple times. He just kind of gets the pro game. That's one of the royal families in the NBA. So now he has credibility. In other words, where John Beeline, what he would have said would have been viewed with skepticism because who is he? Now this is like, oh, he probably knows what he's talking about. So in other words, Bickerstaff is right until proven wrong, where a guy like Beeline is wrong until proven right.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there, Terry. I understand that.
Yeah.
Let's segue over to the Indians right now. They're in spring training in Goodyear, Arizona. They're kind of behind the 8 ball as far as the pitching staff with injuries due to Mike Clevenger and Carlos Carrasco. And right now, how do you see the Indians going into the regular season as far as their pitching goes?
I mean, one thing about since ever Terry Francona took over, they've had a winning season every year. They're the best team after the All-Star break in baseball every year. And people act like they won 39 games last year instead of 93. Right. I mean, they really do. Oh, they don't spend money and this and that. Yeah, it'd be nice to add those things, but they have a lot of good young arms coming, and they have a organization that knows how to develop pitchers. And Francona will tell you, he'd rather try to win a game 3-2 than 13-11 anytime. He just thinks you're better off that way. Fortunately for them, it looks like Clevenger's injury is one that shouldn't keep them out long. And I know they were very worried about when Carrasco came in with a sore hip. I mean, not like hanging over Carrasco is this. He had leukemia last year. He's in remission. Things are good now. But that's a difficult thing to do. But fortunately for the Indians, they have a lot of guys. They have a pitcher named Scott Moss, I like it, that they got last year, and some others. So we'll see how it goes. But as long as you can pitch and you're in the Central Division, you have a real chance, because I just don't think the Twins are going to win 100 games again.
Right, yeah. I mean, and if you look at some of the pitchers they had last year, guys like Savale and Bieber, who really kind of stepped his game up last year. I mean, I think they're in good shape as far as that goes. Now, as far as the hitters go,
right.
I mean, when you're talking about guys like Franmil Reyes, who was there last year, and of course Francisco Lindor, who has the big contract situation kind of looming over not only him but the franchise as well. How do you see the hitters 1 through 9?
Well, one thing, Lindor's got every reason to want to play well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you've got millions upon millions of reasons to want to play well. Because even if the Indians keep him, he goes to arbitration next year, and they'll, based on his stats, his salary will rise up. You still have Carlos Santana can really hit, and you have Franmil Reyes, and you have Jose Ramirez. I'll tell you, a big key is going to be Jose Ramirez. He had about almost a 500 at bat stretch from the end of 2018 to almost midway through 2019, where he hit about 220. It's like he forgot how to hit.
Yeah.
Then he started to hit again, like he did before. He has to have a big year. This has to be Jose Ramirez that's been an all-star in that. That to me, is one of the key parts for their offense, because I think Lindor will hit. I think Santana will hit. They picked up Cesar Hernandez. He's a decent player. Yeah, they're going to be mixing and matching in the outfield, but frankly, they've been doing that for years. They really have. So, I'm upbeat on the Indians because they're one of those teams that kind of find a way. And I know so many fans just focus on as if baseball is determined by the payroll structure, but then that also doesn't explain why is Tampa Bay consistently contender, why is Oakland. It's harder, but it certainly can be done.
Yes, certainly. And finally, Terry, let's segue to the Cleveland Browns. The Combine is going on currently as we speak in Indianapolis, Indiana. Do you think that the Browns should address the offensive and defensive lines in this draft?
Yes and yes.
Yeah, namely the offensive line.
And defensive line. Did you know, now, because these are analytic guys, right?
Right.
I looked up on this thing, Football Outsiders, whatever. They ranked the line like 27th, 25th. Because if you look at how poor they have been against the run, that's what they were held against them. Now you can say, hey, well, Myles Garrett got suspended for the last 6, and Olivier Vernon, was hurt. By the way, Olivier Vernon's always hurt.
Always.
Yeah, so he missed 4 games a couple years ago, 5 games, and then 6 games this last year. So he misses about 40% of the games. If they're going to bring him back, you're going to figure he's going to miss a bunch of games again.
Right.
So I think they have to look at both, adding on the offensive line. But if you don't fix that defensive line, they're just going to run the ball against you. You're going to have problems.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, when you look at some of the guys who their contract is coming up, I remember they were talking a little bit about Kareem Hunt, possibly signing him back again, and some of the other guys. I mean, what outside of addressing both lines of scrimmage in the draft and through free agency is the biggest key for the Browns this offseason?
Well, Hunt's is called he's a restricted free agent. If he plans on playing anywhere, it'll probably be here. The big thing they're looking at, do they bring Joe Schobert back or not? Mm-hmm. And in the past, when they were here, the analytics guys running the team, they let players like Schobert leave. That was Mitchell Schwartz, that was Travis Benjamin, that kind of stuff. As Joe Thomas called them, the working class players, that you really do need. They've been speaking in almost harmony. They being new coach Kevin Stefanski and new GM Andrew Berry. We want guys that are tough, smart, accountable. Well, missing 3 games in 4 years is Schobert, who is tough, smart, accountable, and middle linebacker with a bunch of other young linebackers. I'm looking to see, do they re-sign him? And then along with just how they draft. But that's what they need to do there is start to build a situation where guys actually want to stay here for a while.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, when there's all this, revolving door when it comes to the coach, the GM, and everything like that, it can't help but seep into the rest of the culture of the team. And when you have guys that are staying there for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whether it's players, coaches, GMs, it breeds that. Just not only accountability, but just that consistency.
You want a good offensive line, keep them together for a few years.
Exactly.
They have to learn to play together. It sounds real basic,
right?
But keep them together for a few years. When they had Mitchell Schwartz here with Joe Thomas and Alex Mack, they had a good offensive line, even when in the midst of not much else around them, because they had played together, and then they plugged in with some other guys. There's also a fear and trepidation, like in any workplace. A new regime comes in, people are wondering, am I going to be out or not?
Yeah.
And that keeps happening over and over again. In fact, a lot of times a new general manager comes in, and what's he do? Gets rid of the other guy's players.
Right.
And he brings in his own players.
Exactly.
And he's there a year or two, and then he's out, and then I don't know how many are left now, but at the start of the 2019 season, they only had 9 players left from the pre-John Dorsey years.
Oh.
9.
9.
And he had only been there like a year and a half. So
that's unbelievable.
It is. And so it's probably 7, I don't know. It has to stop, Aaron. And that's hopefully what Stefanski and Andrew Berry are going to be able to do, is get some core guys here that can stay. Secondly, Jimmy Haslam's got to stop firing everybody. Stop.
Just stop.
Because he can't just fire one. He's got to fire both. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He can't just fire the coach or whatever. He's got to fire the coach and the GM.
Right, certainly. Terry Pluto, our guest here on Akron Buzz. Terry, one here real quick before we let you go. Talk about your appearance Monday at the Wycliffe Public Library. And
I do a lot of library talks, and this next one coming up will be Monday at 7 at Wycliffe. And it's a lot of fun. I come out usually in the beginning and just almost chat a little bit like you and I are just doing now about the different teams. I might even talk about a faith column I've written. Then we open it up for questions. And the way I look at it is it's free. So, you go to the library, it's free. People will bring in books. I'll be glad to sign them. I think sometimes the library sells the books to raise some money for the library. So it's a lot of fun. I know I didn't realize this. I recently did Stowe Library. They said it was the 14th consecutive year I've been there.
Yeah.
So, and the cool thing about a library talk is you could do one right now, which that one will be in early March on Monday, and we could do one 2 months later, and the topics might be completely different because how much sports changes. It's not like a guy wrote a book about Appomattox Courthouse in the Civil War. Well, he'll probably be telling the same story over and over again, no matter how many times. But with sports, it's completely different.
Certainly is. Well, Terry, thank you very much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And that was our guest, Terry Pluto, on this edition of Akron Buzz. Be sure to check out this interview as well as all of our other interviews on Akron Buzz on all of our social media platforms. I'm Aaron Coleman. Thanks for watching.